The story begins under the dim glow of Kuala Lumpur International Airport, where the night hums with the quiet energy of travelers moving through the terminal. Malaysia Airlines Flight MH370, a Boeing 777, stands at the gate, its crew conducting final checks before the long-haul journey to Beijing. Passengers, some weary, others excited, file on board, unaware that this routine flight will soon become one of aviation's greatest mysteries. Inside the cockpit, Captain Zahari Ahmad Shah and First Officer Farooq Abdul Hamid run through pre-flight procedures, their voices calm and professional. Air traffic control clears them for takeoff, and at 12:41 a.m. on March 8, 2014, the massive aircraft roars down the runway, lifting smoothly into the dark sky. The last words heard from the cockpit are a routine sign-off. "Good night, Malaysian 370. For the next 38 minutes, everything appears normal. The plane climbs to cruising altitude, passengers settle in, and flight attendants prepare for meal service. The night is clear, the skies peaceful. No one suspects that in just a few moments, the plane will vanish from radar, leaving behind only questions, theories, and a world desperate for answers. The story opens with the quiet pulse of Kuala Lumpur International Airport in the early hours of March 8, 2014. The terminal, bathed in the artificial glow of fluorescent lights, is a world of hushed goodbyes, sleepy travelers, and the distant murmur of boarding announcements. Among the crowd, 227 passengers from various walks of life check their tickets, adjust their carry-ons, and shuffle toward Gate C31, unaware that they are about to board a flight that will vanish into legend. At the jet bridge, Malaysia Airlines Flight MH370, a Boeing 777-200ER, waits like a silent sentinel. Its polished silver fuselage gleams under the runway lights, its engines humming with latent power. The cabin crew, seasoned professionals with years of experience, greet passengers with practiced smiles, directing them to their seats. Among them are businessmen reviewing presentations, families returning home, honeymooners dreaming of Beijing's Great Wall, and a group of Chinese artists carrying delicate calligraphy scrolls in the cargo hold. In the cockpit, Captain Zahari Ahmad Shah, a veteran pilot with over 18,000 flight hours, and First Officer Farooq Abdul Hamid, a young but skilled co-pilot, perform their pre-flight checks with methodical precision. The control panels flicker to life, screens displaying fuel levels, navigation routes, and weather reports, all normal. Outside, the night sky stretches endlessly, a vast black canvas dotted with stars. At exactly 12:41 a.m., air traffic control clears MH370 for takeoff. The engines roar, a deep, vibrating growl that reverberates through the cabin as the aircraft accelerates down the runway. The nose lifts, the wheels leave the ground, and the massive machine soars into the darkness, climbing smoothly toward its initial cruising altitude. Inside, passengers settle in, some adjusting their seats, others already drifting to sleep. A flight attendant begins preparing the beverage cart, the clink of glass bottles faint against the hum of the engines. The last transmission from the cockpit is routine, almost forgettable in its simplicity. Good night, Malaysian 370. For the next 38 minutes, the flight progresses without incident. The plane levels off, cruising effortlessly through calm skies. Below, the South China Sea glimmers under the moonlight, its waves undisturbed. In the cabin, a baby cries softly. A man flips through a magazine, and a young woman gazes out the window at the endless dark. No one knows that this is the last moment of normalcy, because in just a few heartbeats, everything will change. The transponder will go silent. The plane will turn inexplicably off course. And then it will simply disappear. This is how mysteries begin. Not with a scream, but with a whisper. Not with chaos, but with perfect, terrible silence. And by the time the world realizes something is wrong, Flight MH370 will already be gone. The night air is calm as Flight MH370 cruises at 35,000 feet over the South China Sea, its wings slicing through the inky blackness. In the cockpit, the soft glow of instrument panels casts an eerie light on Captain Zahari and First Officer Farik as they monitor their course. The rhythmic hum of the engines is the only sound, a steady reassurance that all is well. At 1:19 a.m., the routine exchange with Malaysian Air Traffic Control ends with those now haunting final words. "Good night, Malaysian 370. The voice is calm, professional, utterly unremarkable. No hint of tension, no flicker of alarm. Just another handoff in the endless dance of global aviation. Then, the impossible happens. The plane's transponder, the device that broadcasts its identity, speed, and altitude to radar, suddenly stops transmitting. One moment, MH370 is a blinking icon on air traffic control screens. The next, it vanishes like a snuffed-out candle. But the plane doesn't fall. It doesn't explode. It turns. Unbeknownst to the world, the Boeing 777 makes a slow, deliberate arc to the west, its new course taking it back across the Malay Peninsula. Military radar later picks up the blip, but in the moment, no one notices. No one reacts. The passengers, if they sense anything at all, might feel only the slightest shift in gravity as the plane banks, nothing more. In the cabin, the lights are dimmed. Most passengers sleep, their heads lolling against seat cushions, while a few watch movies or read. A flight attendant stifles a yawn near the galley. No alarms sound, no oxygen masks drop. If there is panic or confusion, it is locked behind the cockpit door, where the plane's fate is being decided by unseen hands. Meanwhile, on the ground, air traffic controllers in Ho Chi Minh City wait for MH370 to enter their airspace. Minutes pass, then more minutes. The radio calls go unanswered. The radar screens remain empty. A slow, creeping dread takes hold. Where is the plane? By the time the sun rises, the truth is undeniable. Flight MH370, with its 239 souls on board, has disappeared without a trace. No wreckage, no distress signal, no explanation, just silence. And in that silence, a mystery is born, one that will haunt the world for years to come. The digital clock in the cockpit ticks over to 1:19 a.m. as Flight MH370 glides smoothly through the tranquil night sky. Below, the dark waters of the South China Sea reflect scattered moonlight like shattered glass. In the cabin, most passengers have settled into uneasy sleep, their breathing shallow and rhythmic beneath the constant drone of the Rolls-Royce engines. A flight attendant quietly checks seat belts in business class, her soft footsteps absorbed by the carpeted aisle. The last routine radio transmission echoes through the headsets of Kuala Lumpur air traffic controllers, that ordinary, unremarkable good night that would later become the subject of endless analysis. Then, in the span of a single heartbeat, the impossible occurs. First, the transponder winks out. The glowing radar blip that represented 239 lives simply ceases to exist on civilian screens. But military radar, operating on a different system, continues tracking an unidentified aircraft making an inexplicable turn back across the Malay Peninsula. The automated systems don't alarm. They're programmed to detect threats coming in, not going out. In the cockpit, If anyone is still alive and conscious, no mayday call is made, no emergency code is entered. The plane's sophisticated communication systems remain ominously silent, even as the Boeing 777 executes a maneuver that defies all standard procedures. The aircraft's new course takes it through one of the busiest air corridors in the world, yet somehow no commercial pilots report seeing it. At 1:30 a.m., a sleepy air traffic controller in Ho Chi Minh City checks his screen, expecting MH370 to appear any moment. When it doesn't, he rubs his eyes and checks again. The first tendrils of doubt creep in. By 1:52 a.m., when the plane should have made contact, the controller's voice takes on an edge of tension as he repeatedly tries to raise the flight. Meanwhile, the ghost plane continues its journey. Satellite data would later reveal it climbed to 45,000 feet, beyond its approved altitude, before descending again in what experts would theorize was a depressurization event. But in these crucial moments, there are only questions without answers. At 2:15 a.m., Malaysian military radar operators note an unidentified blip moving toward the Strait of Malacca. Protocol demands they investigate, but in the post-9/11 world, their attention remains fixed on potential inbound threats. The blip continues west, then north, then south, a wandering path that will later fuel countless conspiracy theories. As dawn breaks over Southeast Asia, the terrible truth becomes undeniable. Flight MH370 has vanished completely. A modern airliner with all its tracking technology disappeared as thoroughly as a ship in the Bermuda Triangle. The greatest mystery in aviation history has begun. By mid-morning, the first search planes are airborne, sweeping over the Gulf of Thailand where MH370 was last seen on civilian radar. Ships join the effort, cutting through calm waters, their crews scanning the horizon for any sign of wreckage. A life vest, an oil slick, a seat cushion. But the sea reveals nothing. Confusion deepens when Malaysian military officials reveal a startling piece of data. Their radar tracked something, an unidentified aircraft, making a sharp turn back toward the Malay Peninsula after contact was lost. Could it have been MH370? If so, why would it turn off course without a word? Theories erupt like wildfire: a sudden catastrophe, a pilot's deliberate act, a mechanical failure so severe it left no time to react. News spreads globally, and soon the world is watching. Satellite companies are pressed for data. Intelligence agencies review radar feeds. Aviation experts debate possibilities on live television, their voices tight with unease. Meanwhile, in Beijing's airport, families of passengers wait in a cordoned-off area, their faces etched with growing dread. Relatives clutch phones, dialing loved ones over and over, as if sheer willpower might force a connection. By nightfall, the search area has expanded dramatically, stretching from the South China Sea to the Andaman Sea. But with no confirmed debris, no distress signal, and no clear trajectory, investigators are left chasing shadows. The ocean is vast, and the plane could be anywhere. The most unsettling question lingers in the air, unspoken but deafening. How does a modern jetliner, with all its technology, all its redundancies, simply disappear? And as the first full day of searching ends with no answers, a grim truth settles over everyone involved. This isn't just a search anymore. It's the beginning of a mystery that may never be solved. Dawn's pale fingers creep across the South China Sea as the first search planes take off from Subang Air Base, their wings slicing through thick tropical air heavy with unshed rain. Below them, the ocean stretches endlessly, a vast, indifferent expanse that gives up none of its secrets. In the cockpits, pilots strain their eyes against the glare, looking for what none of them want to find. At Malaysia Airlines Crisis Center in Kuala Lumpur, the air conditioning battles against the rising body heat of dozens of officials crammed into the room. Computer screens flicker with overlapping radar images, satellite feeds, and flight path projections. A junior analyst notices something odd. Military radar tracked an unidentified aircraft making a turn back toward Penang at 1:30 a.m. His supervisor initially dismisses it as a ghost echo, but the data won't be ignored. In Beijing, Capital Airport's Terminal 3, the arrivals board still lists MH370 as delayed in cheerful green letters. Families cluster around charging stations, obsessively refreshing flight tracker apps that show the same frozen path over the Gulf of Thailand. A Malaysian Airlines representative makes her third pass through the waiting area, repeating the same empty assurances in increasingly fractured Mandarin. The first press conference is a disaster. Malaysian officials, visibly sweating under TV lights, provide contradictory information about the search area. A Vietnamese colonel interrupts to angrily correct their coordinates live on CNN. Aviation bloggers dissect every mumbled phrase, spotting inconsistencies that bloom into full-blown conspiracy theories before lunchtime. By afternoon, the search zone has ballooned to 27,000 square nautical miles. Thai naval vessels report a suspicious oil slick near the last known position, but lab tests will later confirm it's from a cargo ship. An Australian pilot swears he saw smoke or debris near the Andaman Islands, triggering a frantic redeployment of assets that find nothing but floating logs. In a windowless room at Boeing headquarters, engineers pore over the 777's schematics, running simulations of catastrophic electrical failures. Their models show the plane could theoretically glide for nearly 200 miles after total engine failure, a revelation that sends search teams scrambling to expand the perimeter yet again. As night falls on the second day, exhausted air traffic controllers review voice recordings from that fateful shift. Some swear they hear a muffled distress call in the background static. Others insist it's just interference. The recordings are sent to 3 different audio labs for analysis, each of which will return conflicting conclusions. Meanwhile, in living rooms across the world, cable news anchors gesture dramatically at blinking maps, their voices rising in pitch as each new lead collapses. The phrase, unprecedented in aviation history, is repeated so often it loses all meaning. And in a quiet hotel room near Beijing, a father holds his daughter's passport against his chest, rocking slightly as he watches the chaotic news coverage. His silent tears fall on the unmarked visa pages, each stamp a journey his child will never take again. The world may be confused, but his grief is terrifyingly clear. The search continues in darkness, ships tracing grid patterns across black water illuminated only by sporadic lightning flashes. Somewhere beneath those waves, or perhaps hundreds of miles away, 239 souls remain suspended between Earth and eternity, their fate rewriting aviation history with every fruitless hour of searching. The disappearance of MH370 has become a gaping wound in the fabric of modern aviation, and like any wound, it draws speculation. In conference rooms, news studios, and online forums, theories multiply like shadows stretching at dusk, each one more haunting than the last. In the sterile glow of investigation centers, experts huddle over flight data printouts, their fingers tracing the erratic path the plane might have taken. The satellite handshake pings, those faint digital whispers between the aircraft and an Inmarsat satellite, paint a chilling picture. MH370 flew on, possibly for hours, deep into the southern Indian Ocean. But why? The theory emerges in hushed tones. Investigators comb through Captain Zahari's background, his political leanings, his home flight simulator, his personal life. Was this a deliberate act? A controlled dive into oblivion? The aviation community balks at the idea, but the possibility lingers like a stain. Boeing engineers run simulations. Could a sudden electrical fire have crippled the plane's communications, leaving it a ghost ship flying on autopilot? The 777's redundant systems make it unlikely, but not impossible. Maybe smoke filled the cockpit. Maybe the pilots fought to save the plane even as they lost control. Intelligence agencies review passenger manifests, searching for suspicious names, patterns, connections. Was this a meticulously planned vanishing act? A theft of an entire aircraft? The lack of a ransom demand or political statement makes it improbable, but in the vacuum of facts, even the wildest ideas find oxygen. The manifest included lithium-ion batteries, volatile if mishandled. Could a fire have spread silently, choking the cabin with toxic fumes before anyone could react? The plane's sudden turn west might have been a desperate attempt to reach an airport. But then why no Mayday call? The whispers grow darker. Conspiracy forums buzz with tales of government cover-ups, secret landings in Diego Garcia, even alien abductions. Each theory is more outlandish than the last, yet in the absence of answers, they flourish. Meanwhile, the families of the lost watch in agony as the world dissects possibilities they can't bear to entertain. For them, every theory is a fresh torment, each one offering a different horror, a different way their loved ones might have suffered. The ocean keeps its secrets, the theories multiply, and the truth, if it's out there, remains just beyond reach. The disappearance of MH370 has become a void that the world keeps trying and failing to fill. With no wreckage, no black boxes, and no distress signals, the absence of facts becomes a breeding ground for speculation. The theories don't just emerge, they erupt, each one a desperate attempt to impose order on the unbearable unknown. In the dim glow of late-night newsrooms, aviation experts and former pilots lean forward in their chairs, their faces drawn tight with frustration. Satellite data suggests the plane turned south, carving a lonely path over the Indian Ocean, a route no commercial flight would ever take. Why? The question lingers unanswered as analysts trace the arc of possible trajectories on digital maps, their cursors hovering over thousands of square miles of open water. In private investigator briefings, voices drop to murmurs. The captain's flight simulator recovered from his home shows a eerily similar path, a practice run into the Southern Ocean's emptiness. Coincidence? Or something more? The possibility hangs in the air, toxic and unspoken. No one wants to believe a pilot would do this, but no one can explain why the plane flew for hours without a single word from the cockpit. Elsewhere, engineers hunch over blueprints, sketching scenarios of cascading system failures. A fire? A sudden electrical blackout? Maybe the pilots were fighting to control a crippled aircraft, their Mayday calls lost in dead radios. But the 777 is a fortress of redundancy, its systems designed to outlast disaster. Would it really vanish so completely? The intelligence agencies work in the shadows, sifting through passenger backgrounds, searching for a motive, a hidden threat. 2 men boarded with stolen passports, a red flag that fizzles into nothing when they're revealed to be asylum seekers, not terrorists. Still, the questions persist. Could someone have taken control? Could the plane have been landed somewhere, hidden away like a stolen car in a global garage? The lack of a ransom demand makes it unlikely, but in this new void of certainty, even the impossible feels plausible. Online, the theories spiral into the surreal. The forums buzz with whispers of secret military experiments, of rogue AI in the flight systems, of interdimensional rifts swallowing the plane whole. Each one is more fantastical than the last, yet they thrive in the absence of answers. The families of the lost watch in mute horror as their loved one's fate becomes fodder for conspiracy peddlers and YouTube sleuths. And then there are the debris hunters, amateurs and scientists alike, scouring satellite images for shadows in the water, analyzing ocean currents to predict where a wing flap or seat cushion might wash ashore. Every blurry photo, every fragment of plastic found on a distant beach becomes a potential clue. But the ocean gives up its secret slowly, and each false lead only deepens the frustration. The world wants a villain. It wants a reason. But the truth, if it exists, remains locked in the depths, or in the silence of a cockpit that will never speak again. And so the theories multiply, each one a flickering candle in the dark, none of them bright enough to illuminate what really happened to Malaysia Airlines Flight 370. 12 months of searching, 12 months of false leads and dead ends. The world had begun to resign itself to the idea that Flight MH370 might remain a ghost story forever, until the ocean finally spoke. It began with numbers, cold, unfeeling data points, the faint electronic handshakes between the lost Boeing 777 and an Inmarsat satellite, drifting in geostationary orbit. At first, they meant nothing. Just automated pings, digital breadcrumbs scattered across the sky. But when engineers plotted them on a map, a chilling pattern emerged. The plane hadn't just disappeared, it had flown on, southward into the vast emptiness of the southern Indian Ocean, far from any landing strip, far from any hope. The calculations were agonizing. The satellite could only measure the time it took for each ping to travel, leaving investigators to triangulate a possible flight path, a sweeping arc thousands of miles long. It was like trying to find a needle in an ocean. Then, in July 2015, a fisherman on Reunion Island, a speck of French territory off the coast of Africa, spotted something unnatural washed up on the black volcanic sand. A curved piece of fiberglass, barnacled and bleached by salt, a flaperon from the wing of a Boeing 777. The serial number confirmed it. MH370 had been found, or at least a piece of it had. The discovery sent shockwaves through the investigation. Oceanographers traced currents backward, mapping how the debris might have drifted from the crash site. More fragments surfaced. A piece of engine cowling in Mozambique, a seat cushion in Madagascar, a chunk of cabin interior in Tanzania. Each one was a breadcrumb leading back into the darkness. Yet the debris told a fractured story. The barnacles clinging to the flaperon suggested it had been in the water for over a year. The lack of burn marks or explosive damage hinted at a controlled ditching, not a mid-air breakup. But how? And why? The satellite data pointed to a remote stretch of ocean west of Australia, a graveyard of waves known as the Seventh Arc. Search ships descended on the area, their sonar arrays scanning the underwater mountains and trenches for any sign of wreckage. They found nothing. The ocean had given up a few pieces, but it refused to surrender the rest. The debris was a taunt, a riddle without an answer. It proved the plane had crashed, but it couldn't say why or how or where the rest of it had gone. And so the families were left with a new kind of agony, not the torment of not knowing, but the torment of knowing just enough. The fragments were all they would ever get, a broken wing, a shattered piece of trim, a silent ocean keeping its secrets. Malaysia Airlines Flight 370 was no longer missing. It was gone. The southern Indian Ocean is a place of primordial silence, where swells born in the Antarctic march endlessly across empty horizons. Here, in these merciless waters, the first real whispers of MH370's fate finally surfaced. Not as answers, but as fragments of a language no one could fully decipher. The breakthrough came from an unlikely source, a team of British satellite engineers staring at spreadsheets of time-stamped pings. These electronic whispers between the dying aircraft and Inmarsat's aging satellite had been dismissed as noise in the early chaos. But now, under meticulous analysis, they revealed their terrible poetry. Each ping marked a heartbeat, not just confirming the plane's survival hours after disappearance, but plotting its lonely march into oceanic oblivion along what investigators called the seventh arc. The data suggested an eerie conclusion. Someone, or something, had kept MH370 flying until fuel exhaustion sent it plunging into the sea in a death spiral. When the first verified piece of wreckage washed ashore on Réunion Island, it carried the stench of the deep, salt-crusted, its edges gnawed by unseen creatures. The flaperon's internal damage patterns became a Rorschach test for investigators. French aeronautical experts noted the extended flaps suggested a controlled ditching, while Australian transport safety officials pointed to fracture marks indicating high-speed impact. Both interpretations couldn't be true, yet the debris refused to yield its secrets. The ocean current models became their own kind of detective story. Oceanographers from Germany's GEOMAR Institute released animated drift patterns showing how the flaperon might have traveled 2,500 nautical miles on the mighty South Equatorial Current. But when more debris appeared along the African coastline, a honeycombed piece of horizontal stabilizer in Mozambique, a section of cabin paneling in South Africa, their distribution defied perfect explanation. Each fragment seemed to whisper different truths about the plane's final moments. In a Kuala Lumpur warehouse, families of the victims stood gloved hands trembling as they touched the warped relics. A father ran fingers over the faint serial number stamp on a seat frame, his tears falling where his daughter might have sat. Scientists explained the biologic fouling, the barnacles clinging to the debris contained isotopes that might reveal the wreck's location. But when analyzed, the shellfish isotopes pointed not to one site, but to a 600-mile corridor of possibility. The most haunting discovery came not from the ocean, but from a Malaysian lab. On the flaperon's interior surface, technicians found strange scrape marks, parallel grooves that matched no known failure pattern. Aviation consultants debated whether they indicated cockpit manipulation of flight controls in the final seconds, or simply the violence of the ocean's embrace. Like everything with MH370, the evidence dissolved into ambiguity when examined too closely. By the time the official debris report was published, it read like an archaeological study of some ancient, unfathomable disaster. 27 confirmed pieces recovered across 15,000 miles of coastline, each telling a different fraction of the story. The satellite data had promised answers, but the ocean, that great keeper of secrets, had only given us broken pieces of the mirror, each reflecting a different facet of the truth. In Perth, the Joint Agency Coordination Center quietly updated their maps. The original 120,000 square kilometer search zone had been scoured without result. Now, oceanographers proposed a new area based on drift studies, a last, desperate gamble before winter storms made searching impossible. As the sonar ships deployed their deep-sea drones once more, the families learned a cruel lesson. Even when the ocean gives up its dead, it never truly lets go. The southern Indian Ocean does not give up its secrets easily. Here, where the seabed plunges into abyssal trenches deeper than the Himalayas are tall, the search for MH370 becomes a technological odyssey, one marked by false hope, crushing setbacks, and the growing realization that some mysteries might never be solved. The search zone is a graveyard of geography, an underwater wasteland of extinct volcanoes and jagged ridges known as the Broken Ridge. Sonar maps reveal a landscape more alien than Mars, where sheer cliffs drop into valleys untouched by sunlight for millennia. It is here, based on those haunting satellite pings, that investigators believe the wreckage lies. The first ships arrive like pilgrims to a sacred site, their decks laden with equipment worth millions. Autonomous underwater vehicles, AUVs, dubbed Orca and Bluefin, are lowered into the swells, mechanical bloodhounds programmed to scour the ocean floor in precise grid patterns. They move through the darkness with eerie purpose, their floodlights cutting through water so deep the pressure could crush a nuclear submarine. Months pass. The AUVs return with terabytes of data, but no wreckage. The ocean teases them, a sonar shadow here, a metallic reflection there, but each potential lead dissolves upon closer inspection. A promising debris field turns out to be a geological formation. A cluster of sonar contacts becomes a shipwreck from the 19th century. The teams work in rotating shifts, the monotony broken only by false alarms that set hearts racing before dashing hopes. Back in Perth, the Joint Agency Coordination Center becomes a pressure cooker of frustration. Oceanographers argue over current models. Engineers debate whether they're searching in the wrong place, or if the pings were misinterpreted from the start. The families watch from afar, their grief now compounded by bureaucratic fatigue. Each press conference a reminder that the world's best technology is failing them. Then, in 2018, a private company named Ocean Infinity arrives with a bold promise. Their cutting-edge drones will find the plane where governments failed. Their contract is unusual, no cure, no pay. The crew works around the clock, chasing whispers in the data. But even their state-of-the-art equipment finds nothing but underwater canyons and endless fields of silt. As the final search draws to a close, the crews face a bitter truth. They may have been looking in the wrong place all along. New drift analyses suggest the plane could be hundreds of miles north. But the funding dries up, the ships are recalled, and the AUVs are powered down for the last time. The ocean won this round. It kept its secrets. The search teams develop gallows humor. They nickname persistent sonar ghosts Margaret, a particularly stubborn rock formation that resembles a wing section, and the false prophet, a thermal vent that emits metallic readings. When an AUV gets stuck in a mud volcano for 36 hours, no one laughs. The incident costs $2 million in lost time. As months stretch into years, the political will erodes. The Malaysian government faces increasing pressure to abandon what critics call the most expensive maritime wild goose chase in history. Ocean Infinity's no-find, no-fee contract expires without success. Final reports speak of unprecedented challenges and regrettable limitations of current technology. On the last day of operations, the crew of the seabed constructor holds a quiet ceremony. They throw a wreath into the water at the exact coordinates where the final satellite handshake placed MH370. The flowers are swallowed by waves instantly, as if the ocean itself is impatient to erase this human intrusion. Back in the war room, A junior analyst makes one last pass through the data. There's one anomaly, a faint sonar return from an unexplored ridge near the seventh arc. It's probably nothing. They mark it anyway. The lights go out. The files are archived. Somewhere below, in the Hadal darkness, the sea keeps its secrets, and the families are left staring at satellite images of empty ocean, wondering if they'll ever know whether their loved ones rest in those unseen depths or somewhere else entirely. The greatest search in aviation history ends not with a discovery, but with a slow fade to black. The disappearance of MH370 was not just a tragedy. It became a void that the world rushed to fill with whispers, shouts, and desperate imaginings. As the official searches wound down, the conspiracy theories roared to life, spreading like wildfire through the digital age's endless corridors of speculation. And in their shadow, the families of the lost were left to navigate a labyrinth of grief, hope, and torment. In the dim glow of internet forums and late-night talk shows, the theories took on lives of their own. Some claimed the plane had been hijacked and diverted to a remote airstrip, perhaps in Kazakhstan, or the jungles of Cambodia, or the secretive military base on Diego Garcia. Grainy satellite images surfaced, purporting to show the intact fuselage lying in some forgotten corner of the world. Experts dismissed them as shadows and pareidolia, but believers clung to them like scripture. Others spun darker tales of government cover-ups, of black market organ trafficking, of experimental technology gone wrong. A retired French aviation investigator published a book suggesting the plane had been shot down in a classified military operation. A former airline pilot turned YouTube personality dissected the radar data frame by frame, insisting the turns were too precise to be anything but deliberate. The theories multiplied, each more elaborate than the last, feeding on the absence of hard evidence. But for the families, the conspiracy theories were not abstract debates. They were fresh wounds, salted with doubt and false hope. A mother in Beijing kept her son's bedroom untouched, convinced he would return from whatever secret prison held him. A husband in Malaysia spent his life savings hiring private investigators to chase leads in Madagascar, where debris had washed ashore. Every new breakthrough reported by tabloids sent them spiraling. Was it possible? Could their loved ones still be alive? The anguish was compounded by the growing distrust of authorities. Malaysian officials, already criticized for their handling of the early investigation, became targets of suspicion. Why had the military radar data taken so long to release? Why were certain passenger backgrounds not fully disclosed? The family's grief curdled into anger, their protests growing louder as the years passed without answers. In a community center outside Kuala Lumpur, support groups became battlegrounds of belief. Some relatives refused to hold memorials, convinced a miraculous return was still possible. Others, exhausted by the emotional whiplash, begged for closure, even if it meant accepting the worst. A father whose daughter had been on the flight spoke through tears at a press conference. "We don't need more theories. We need the truth. Even if it's unbearable, we deserve to know." But the truth remained elusive. The debris found on distant shores proved the plane had crashed, but it couldn't say why, or how, or where the rest of it lay. The ocean had surrendered only fragments, as if taunting them with pieces of a puzzle they would never complete. And so the families were left suspended, between hope and despair, between faith and skepticism, between the unbearable weight of loss and the torturous possibility that somewhere, somehow, the answers still existed. The world moved on. The documentaries were made, the books were published, the theories flourished and faded. But for those who had loved the 239 souls aboard MH370, the vanishing was not just a mystery, it was an open wound that refused to heal. And in the silence left by the unanswered questions, the whispers of conspiracies grew louder, filling the void with noise, but never with answers. The disappearance of MH370 became a Rorschach test for the modern age, where every shadow in the data spawned new nightmares and every official statement bred deeper suspicion. In government conference rooms and internet chat rooms alike, the same evidence produced radically different truths, all equally plausible in the absence of certainty. In Langley, CIA analysts pored over intercepted communications from the South China Sea, searching for whispers that never came. In a Moscow apartment, a former aerospace engineer live-streamed to thousands, demonstrating with plastic models how the plane could have been swallowed by a classified Russian weapon. The theories metastasized with each passing year, evolving like some digital age folklore. The Malaysian government hiding evidence of pilot suicide, American stealth technology masking a hijacking, even whispers of a Bermuda Triangle-like vortex in the Indian Ocean. The families existed in a purgatory of contradictions. Chinese relatives formed an activist group that stormed the Malaysian embassy, hurling water bottles at stone-faced guards, while others quietly paid psychics who claimed to receive messages from the lost. A French woman whose brother had boarded the flight became obsessed with a blurry satellite image showing what she swore was a man-made shape on the ocean floor. She mortgaged her home to fund a private sonar scan that found only seamounts. In a community center outside Kuala Lumpur, support groups became battlegrounds of belief. Some relatives refused to hold memorials, convinced a miraculous return was still possible. Others, exhausted by the emotional whiplash, begged for closure, even if it meant accepting the worst. A father whose daughter had been on the flight spoke through tears at a press conference. "We don't need more theories. We need the truth. Even if it's unbearable, we deserve to know." But the truth remained elusive. The debris found on distant shores proved the plane had crashed, but it couldn't say why or how, or where the rest of it lay. The ocean had surrendered only fragments, as if taunting them with pieces of a puzzle they would never complete. And so the families were left suspended, between hope and despair, between faith and skepticism, between the unbearable weight of loss and the torturous possibility that somewhere, somehow, the answers still existed. The world moved on. The documentaries were made, the books were published, the theories flourished and faded. But for those who had loved the 239 souls aboard MH370, the vanishing was not just a mystery, it was an open wound that refused to heal. And in the silence left by the unanswered questions, the whispers of conspiracies grew louder, filling the void with noise, but never with answers. The disappearance of MH370 became a Rorschach test for the modern age, where every shadow in the data spawned new nightmares and every official statement bred deeper suspicion. In government conference rooms and internet chat rooms alike, the same evidence produced radically different truths, all equally plausible in the absence of certainty. In Langley, CIA analysts pored over intercepted communications from the South China Sea, searching for whispers that never came. In a Moscow apartment, a former aerospace engineer live-streamed to thousands, demonstrating with plastic models how the plane could have been swallowed by a classified Russian weapon. The theories metastasized with each passing year, evolving like some digital age folklore. The Malaysian government hiding evidence of pilot suicide, American stealth technology masking a hijacking, even whispers of a Bermuda Triangle-like vortex in the Indian Ocean. The families existed in a purgatory of contradictions. Chinese relatives formed an activist group that stormed the Malaysian embassy, hurling water bottles at stone-faced guards, while others quietly paid psychics who claimed to receive messages from the lost. A French woman whose brother had boarded the flight became obsessed with a blurry satellite image showing what she swore was a man-made shape on the ocean floor. She mortgaged her home to fund a private sonar scan that found only seamounts. Time passes. Years turn into a decade. The world moves on, as it always does, to new tragedies, new mysteries, new headlines. But for those touched by the vanishing of Flight MH370, time does not heal. It merely stretches the absence into something vast and unending. The legacy of the disappearance is etched into aviation history like a scar. In conference rooms from Montreal to Singapore, regulators mandate new tracking systems, real-time satellite monitoring for all commercial flights, so that no plane can ever disappear like this again. The technology bears MH370's invisible fingerprints, a memorial written in code and policy. Boeing redesigns cockpit security protocols, while airlines implement additional psychological screening for pilots. These changes are MH370's ghost, haunting the industry with the specter of what was lost. Yet for all the procedural reforms, the fundamental questions remain, stubborn and unresolved. Why did MH370 turn? Who or what was in control during those final hours? The ocean has surrendered only fragments, each one a whisper without context. The flaperon, the seat cushion, the scrap of cabin interior, they are like pages torn from a novel, hinting at a story that will never be fully told. The families exist in a liminal space between grief and defiance. Some have accepted the official conclusions, others refuse, clinging to the possibility that new evidence will emerge. Memorials stand in Kuala Lumpur, Beijing, and Perth, stone and metal monuments to lives suspended in uncertainty. The relatives visit them on anniversaries, placing flowers beneath engraved names, running fingers over the letters as if touch could bridge the gap between the living and the lost. Scientists and explorers still dream of finding the wreckage. Every few years, a new expedition is proposed, a billionaire's passion project, a government's last-ditch effort, a university's research initiative. Sonar technology improves, underwater drones grow more sophisticated. But the southern Indian Ocean guards its secrets jealously, its depths still largely uncharted, its currents unpredictable. And so, the mystery endures. It lingers in the quiet moments, when a plane passes overhead in the night sky, when a satellite blinks in orbit, when a piece of driftwood washes ashore on a distant beach. It lingers in the questions asked by a new generation too young to remember the disappearance, but fascinated by its enigma. Most of all, it lingers in the silence, because after all the theories, all the searches, all the grief and anger and speculation, the essential truth remains, somewhere in the dark, beneath tons of crushing pressure, MH370 waits. And the ocean isn't talking. The years stretched on, but the mystery of MH370 refused to settle into history's graveyard of solved cases. Instead, it took root in the collective consciousness, growing more haunting with each passing anniversary. The disappearance became more than an aviation incident. It transformed into a modern myth, a Rorschach test for our deepest fears about technology's fragility and the vast, indifferent power of nature. In aviation schools, instructors used MH370 as a cautionary tale, their laser pointers tracing the ghostly flight path across projection screens. This they would say gravely, is why we never assume redundancy equals invincibility. The next generation of pilots learned to triple-check emergency protocols, their eyes occasionally darting nervously to the ocean below during transcontinental flights. Air traffic control centers installed new radar overlays that could track aircraft even beyond terrestrial radar range. The software updates quietly dubbed MH370 patches by engineers. The family's anguish evolved into something more complex, a permanent state of ambiguous grief that psychologists began studying as a new phenomenon. Some relatives became amateur investigators, their homes transformed into war rooms of nautical charts and satellite data. Others found purpose in advocacy, successfully pushing for international agreements on real-time flight tracking. A Malaysian mother who lost her son launched a foundation that used sonar technology to search for other missing vessels, telling reporters, "If I can't find his plane, maybe I can help someone else find closure." Oceanographers continued to piece together the debris drift patterns, their research unexpectedly advancing scientific understanding of deep-sea currents. The barnacles clinging to recovered fragments became biological clocks, their growth rings helping map previously unknown subsurface flows. What began as a search for wreckage quietly revolutionized marine science, though the researchers hesitated to call it progress. "Every discovery feels bittersweet," admitted one oceanographer. "We're learning so much about how the ocean moves, but not enough to bring them home." The conspiracy theories never died. They simply mutated. A new generation of internet sleuths applied machine learning to satellite images, claiming to spot wreckage that experts dismissed as pareidolia. Virtual reality reconstructions of possible crash scenarios garnered millions of views, turning tragedy into speculative entertainment. The most persistent theory involved a shadowy MH370 truther convention that met annually in Kuala Lumpur, where attendees traded increasingly elaborate alternative explanations like collectors swapping rare cards. In quiet moments, the aviation industry still grappled with uncomfortable questions. Veteran pilots would sometimes wake from nightmares featuring a silent, ghostly 777 flying endlessly through darkness. Airline executives, while praising improved tracking systems, privately wondered if they'd simply made it harder, rather than impossible, for such a disappearance to happen again. The fundamental vulnerability remained, that in our hyper-connected world, a determined disappearance might still be possible. The sea, meanwhile, kept its secrets with perfect indifference. Periodic expeditions continued to launch, armed with ever more sophisticated technology, only to return empty-handed. The underwater drones now carried sensors that could detect chemical traces of jet fuel in the water column, but the southern Indian Ocean revealed nothing. Each failure only deepened the mystery, leaving investigators to wonder if they were searching in the wrong place or if the ocean had simply swallowed the plane whole. On the 10th anniversary, a memorial service was held simultaneously in 3 countries, connected by live satellite feed, an ironic technological solution to a tragedy born from technological failure. As the names of the lost were read aloud, a strange quiet settled over the crowds. Not the quiet of acceptance, but the quiet of a question mark that had grown too heavy to voice. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell for more. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. See you in the next one. Bye for now.